They say which countries should host a PLE in 2026. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Money Mike, and Joe Hendry's theme song works well with the topic of this video because as we do dwindle down the year, it's time to start thinking about what international shows could we see in 2026. And I have 8 countries here. Obviously, you're not going to have you're not going to have 8 PLEs in different countries, but obviously there are some countries out there where maybe the WWE should consider hosting a PLE. We've seen the global expansion of international shows over these last couple years under TKO, and I expect that to continue going forward into 2026, as I fully do expect a international WrestleMania, SummerSlam, maybe even Survivor Series, maybe even Royal Rumble. The big four PLEs I do expect to go international at some point. But let's go ahead, go over 8 countries that I lined up here that I think should get a PLE in 2026 and beyond. Hey, so remember that random push of Jinder Mahal in 2017? Well, part of that can be because of the fact that India is one of the biggest fan bases that the WWE has across the world. And pushing Jinder Mahal at that time, even though a lot of fans did not seem to like it, the WWE had the idea of pushing Jinder Mahal ahead of their India tour in 2017. And with the WWE now doing global PLEs across the board, you would have to think India being one of the biggest fan bases outside the United States, that a PLE coming to India is certainly going to happen at some point, maybe next year, but maybe the year after that. And let's go to a more recent show, SmackDown last week in Dublin, Ireland. I believe Ireland as a whole will get a PLE in 2026 or beyond, specifically Dublin most likely. The influx of talent in Ireland, it makes make sense for them to do a PLE. Like, can you imagine Sheamus finally winning the Intercontinental Championship in Ireland? I mean, that would be huge. You know, the pop that Sheamus would get winning the Intercontinental Championship finally after all these years in his home country would be absolutely amazing. Given we have Becky, Lyra, Finn, JD McDonough's big head, the influx of stars from Ireland makes it worthy of a PLE in 2026 and beyond. Moving on to one that was a rumor from last year, which was Backlash taking place in Japan. Now, this ended up being a fan-made concept. I think someone made a fan-made logo and a concept for Backlash Japan. Now, obviously, Backlash ended up being in St. Louis, and the WWE does have a Japan tour coming up, so it is more likely that they could announce a PLE in Japan next year at this time, when they do the tour later this year. Also, the last time they did a big PLE in Japan was that Beast from the East special in 2015 that was centered around Brock Lesnar. And guess who just made his return? Brock Lesnar. So you could do Beast from the East too, or whatever. But it's one of those things where you count the influence of New Japan with the Bullet Club, AJ Styles, Finn Balor, Shinsuke Nakamura, Asuka, Kairi, Io. The influx of talent from Japan makes this a reasonable chance that there could be a Japan PLE in the near future. This October, the WWE will be returning to Perth, Australia for Crown Jewel. This is the second PLE that Perth, Australia has had over the last year or so, as they did host Elimination Chamber. And why should Perth, Australia have all the fun, right? Why not Sydney? Why not Melbourne? We know the WWE is going back to Melbourne later this year in October. I think they're just going to stay in Australia after Crown Jewel, I believe, is when those shows will take place. But also, let's not forget, 2018 they held a super show there, which was the first pay-per-view in Melbourne in Australia at that time. And they have not had a PLE since. Again, it's always been in Perth, Australia the last couple years. So I think, to me, a return to Melbourne or even going to Sydney could very well be in the cards for the WWE in the future. Next up, we have Singapore, which ideally probably will get a PLE because of its ties with the UFC as well. UFC, WWE under the TKO banner. I fully expect TKO to tap into that market. Perhaps this, Singapore being one of those weekends that was talked about over a year ago, where it would be a super weekend where we would have a UFC fight and a WWE PLE in the same weekend. And let's move on to Italy. Now, we all remember that infamous episode of Monday Night Raw where Santino made his debut against Umaga and won the Intercontinental Championship, and that was in Italy. And I don't know about you, but a PLE in Italy, especially with the partnership with TNA, you could have Santino be the guest general manager for that show. And while the WWE did tap into that Italy market earlier this year with a SmackDown from Bologna, Italy, on the road to WrestleMania, I think it's safe to say from that crowd in Italy back in March that they have proved that Italy deserves a PLE in the near future. And much like Bologna, Italy, WWE tapped into this next country that deserves a PLE, that being Barcelona, Spain. They hosted SmackDown earlier this year on the road to WrestleMania. And once again, as always, the European crowds show up, and Spain was no different. And I think a lot of people would agree that Spain, Italy, all these European countries deserve a PLE. And last but not least, the most obvious one. Hell, I would not be surprised if Backlash Mexico, another rumored Backlash event, becomes a reality with the purchase of AAA, being incorporated into the WWE, as we see with Dominic Mysterio going for the AAA Mega Championship on September 12th. And we've seen Mystery Iguana, we've seen a lot of integration into the main roster of AAA. It feels like the next big step is a PLE in Mexico or Mexico City to cement the WWE AAA relationship, or i.e. purchase of AAA. And it would not surprise me if Backlash Mexico became a thing in 2026 and was the site of Backlash next year, or some major PLE in 2026. We did have the super shows earlier this year in Mexico, so I do think the next step would be a major PLE. And with the likes of the NFL having games in Mexico City, it only makes sense for the WWE to follow suit with PLEs in Mexico City. So, So, which countries do you want to see the WWE tour in 2026 and beyond? Which countries deserve a PLE? Let me know in the comments below, guys. Again, let's go ahead and enjoy another great weekend of international crowds in France. I'm looking forward to SmackDown, Raw, Clash in Paris. So again, so with that said, ladies and gentlemen, I've been your host, Money Mike, and you've been watching Ringside Cinema.